This is Gemara's Zevachim, Daf Tes Vav, and we're holding the bottom of Yudalid Amid Beis. The learning should be an incredible schos refuah shlema for Gavriel Simcha ben Miriam Ahuva. The incredible Kayach HaTorah should bring Gavriel Simcha ben Miriam Ahuva a complete refuah shlema. We're holding 12 lines at the bottom. The first one in the line is Shimon. As you begin with a shayla. Ibayilahu asks the Gemara, Ha'ilacha shaloi beregel, shema ha'ilacha, eloi shema halacha. If you transport, we know ha'ilacha is one of the dalid avodos of every carbon, as we've been discussing the past few dafim. So if you go and you perform ha'ilacha, shaloi beregel, you transport something without your feet, which we'll see in a few moments what exactly that means. Is that considered a halacha or not? And of course, we have to realize whether it's considered halacha or not is always a dual shaila. Number one, if halacha is critical, if it's not halacha, you would have to do it again. Number two, if during the halacha we know you have a machshava zara, you have an inappropriate thought, if it's considered a halacha, it will passel. If it's not considered halacha, then it won't. So there's always this duality within the shaila of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, so it's halacha shebregel shema halacha lo shema halacha tashema. Let's bring a raya. Says the Gemara. Says the Bryce of Chain Yeshev Chain small pas. If you're sitting using your left hand, it's possible. So we're medayik. If you're standing similar to sitting. What's standing similar to sitting? That you're standing in a way that you're conveying without moving. We think it's kosher. Says more no raya. Maybe it means sitting is you're dragging yourself along. And Aimid is denied porta that you're moving a little bit. And therefore there's no raya to our shayla. Because our shayla b'alacha shloi beregel, the Gemara is learning right now, is you're not moving at all. So Tashema tries the Gemara again. Shachi Yisrael did the shechita v'kibul hakoyin nasa l'chaveiroi v'chaveir l'chaveiroi, and they kept on handing the carbon one to the next. It's talking about particularly about the carbon Pesach, and we see over here that this works. So what do we see? We see that even though it was shaloi beregel, no one actually walked. It was just handed hand to hand, the conveyor belt. What do we see? We see it works. So simne halacha shaloi beregel shema halacha. Says the Gemara, no raya hasanami denaidi porta, you moved a little bit. Says the Gemara, my kamashton, if you moved a little bit, so what's the chiddush? Says the Gemara, hilchos pesach dikadin beroivam hadras melch. You know what the chiddush is? That when it comes to the carbon pesach, this is the yesod by many, if not all mitzvahs, that the most people, the more people, the glory to the king. So you want to perform the Karban Pesach with a lot of people, and that's the chiddush. But in a chanami, not necessarily is there any movement. Tashema, the Gemara tries again 3 lines to the bottom. Kibala kosher, if someone who's kosher catches the blood, v'nasal apostle and gives someone who's apostle. What's halacha? Yachzer lekosher. You have to give it back to one who is kosher. So what do we see from here, says the Gemara? We see from the fact you have to give it back, we see that handing the blood to someone else, even though there was no movement of the feet, is not called halacha, and that's why you have to do it again. So seemingly we have a raya, halacha shaloi beregel, which now we're realizing means simply to hand from hand to hand. What does it seem? It seems it's going to be kosher, it's going kosher, it's going to be called halacha. Says the Gemara, no, ima yachzer ha-kosher v'kablenu. Maybe what it means is that the kohen who's kosher should go back and do the halacha again, meaning maybe it wasn't a halacha. And gufa, the problem is now apostles holding it. So what do? You go back and you take it, but it would not be a raya that halacha shloi beregel is shema halacha. Says the Gemara, itmar. So what? We don't have a raya, so the Gemara ends off with a memra. Amar ula amar Rav Yechon on the last line. Halacha shloi beregel loi shema halacha. Says the Gemara, psak from Rav Yechon. It's not called halacha. On the bottom, Rashi spells out, as we said, ve'enai kasher la'ilicha chein ve'en machshavas mefageles ba. the duality. Number one, it's not a kosher halacha. But number two, on the flip side, if you had an appropriate thought at that moment, it would not passel up the carbon. So now, says the Gemara, as we turn over to Tetzvav Amar Aleph, a direct segue from this shayla. Ask the Gemara, Efshar l'takune or lo efshar l'takune? Are you able to fix it or not? If one did such a halacha, if one did halacha shaloi berego, which he said is not a good halacha, can you fix it? Tashema, the price we just quoted, kibla kasher v'nasla pasli yachsel kasher. Unihi, and even if you're going to tell me nami di yachzar kasher v'kablanu, like the Gemara answered, that really the case is that the kasher goes back and takes it again. So unihi nami yachzar kasher kablanu. So every time you can fix your problem, if so it's going to be puzzle. So what does it help that you're going to go back and take it again? So says the Gemara, Masiraya, that it's efshel l'takune. Answer responds the Gemara, no. Misavris the kaizar gavai, loy the kaizar baroi. It wasn't a forward motion. Eino chanami. If you passed it to the zar forward, then maybe you would be right. But says the Gemara, the case that you passed it backwards. Kaizar baroi. He's outside, further away. And says the Gemara, maybe that's the reason why you could do it again. Meaning, in a normal case, maybe lo yafshel l'takune. You know, I hear you could, because you didn't go forwards. And therefore, we don't have a raya from this brisa at all. So once again, says the Gemara, Itmar, in lieu of raya, Amar Ula, 6 lines to the top, Amar Yuchel, Alach Shal Beregel, Psula. And the fact that he says it's possible, he didn't just say Shaloi Shmei Halacha. He says it's possible. Alma from there were Medayik, Lo Yafshel Takuni, you can fix it. So the Gemara is concluding, Halacha Shloi Beregel, on the bottom of Amid Beis, we said Lo Yishma Halacha. And now we're taking it to the next step and saying it's Psula, Lo Yafshel Takune. Esvei asked the Gemara, Rav Nachman Ra'ula, Nishach Min HaKli Ala Ritzba. We have the clumsy kohen. He drops the dam onto the floor. The osvai kosher, and he gathers it in. What's the din? The din is it's kosher. Says the Gemara. What do you see? You see, seemingly, even though it's falling forwards, l'chayra, yet you're able to gather it. You told me it's sula, you can't fix it. Responds the Gemara. No kashak sheyatza lachutz. The case here is referring to where the blood went outward, meaning away from the Mizbeach. Again, it's similar to Teretz. Says Gemara, Lebarai Nafik, like Avay Ayel. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Does blood only go one way? What in the world do you mean? When you spill something, it spills. You can't spill in one direction. It can't be. Says the Gemara, responds the Gemara, B'makaim Madroin, where the blood spilled and it was a slope, and in a chanami it only spilled away from the Mizbeach. Or Iba Yisem Beguma, or there was a hole in the floor, Iba Yisem Besmicha, or we're talking about a thick liquid. Blood is a thick liquid, and therefore it is possible it will only spread in one direction. But now, as we often find in Gemaras, anytime a Gemara has a strange ukimta that the whole case has to be in the, you spill the blood in the one place with the hole or the one place with the slope. Says the Gemara, the Tana came along to teach us all these fascinating cases. Kasha number 1. Va'ayda number 2. Adatani bidach perkin. We learned in the other parak, this is going to be Tav Chavei. So why didn't that Mishnah, the classical kasha, lift like day? If the only time it's possible is in a certain scenario, and kosher in a certain scenario, our case is kosher, that case is possible, so the Mishnah should differentiate. But so says the Gemara, you're right to Yofta. It is a good kasha and Ula. Ula said it's halacha shlei beregel is psula lo yafshel takune. Gemara says that is incorrect. Itmar continues the Gemara, a new sugya. We're about 15 lines down. The first one line is Itmar. a new sugya, but within the same sugya. Says the Gemara, Itmar. Haylacha shloi beregel machlekes Rav Shimon ve'Rabbanan. This idea that we've been talking about, halacha shloi beregel, says the Gemara, it's in machlekes. Haylacha Rabasi dekuli amalei pligi. No one argues by a long halacha. When you're walking with the dam, we'll call this the classical halacha. No one argues the psula. No one argues that if you have a machshava zara, it's going to be pasoled. Keep ligi by halacha zutrasi. We argue the short halacha. That's going to be the machlekes. Rav Shimon says it's not going to pasol. Why? Because this is not called halacha. The Chacham is going to say that it is. So machichu Allah b'marava. In Eretz Yisrael, they found this quite funny. Now, why is this funny? Let's look further in the Gemara. Elachatas ha'oif asks the Gemara, the psula ba machshava le Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon said the chatas ha'oif is a pasal machshava hechem mishkachas lo. How's it going to be possible? Again, by the chatas ha'oif, you do the malika, you shecht it with your fingernail, and then you got to squeeze out the dam. So says the Gemara, what point did you have the wrong machshava? If it's before the blood came out, like Lamu, the blood didn't come out yet. V'basar did not think dam after the blood came out. It's Yavalei mitzvah, so you did the mitzvah by getting the blood out. So what is the case going to be? Says the Gemara, my kushya, delma midaparish v'adamatul mizveach. From the moment it's going to be basal, from the time it comes from the bird until it reaches the mizveach. Daha, where do we see this? By minei Rav Yemir Rav Zera. If someone is sprinkling the blood, and his hand was cut off, as the blood is in the air, his hand gets cut off. What's the halacha? My time of he's of an asan binan, because you need to be able to sprinkle and place it. So what do we see? We see that the hazaya, we see the sprinkling goes from the moment it's done until it actually hits the mizbeach. And therefore, if his hand's cut off, the halach is going to be, the carbon is going to be psula. So shows the Gemara that this can't be why they were laughing at what Rav Shimon said, because there's a very sensible pshat. So rather, Kyasar Apapa Ravuna, 3 lines of the white lines, Breder Yeshua, Mibei Rav, Amru Hainu Chucha. This was why they were laughing by Lacha Rabasi. Loi pligi. They were laughing that they said that they don't argue about halacha rabasi. Why? V'haki pligi b'halacha rabasi pligi. That is gufa where they argue. Ela b'halacha zutrasa kuliyam loi pligi deloi pasla. And ki pligi b'halacha rabasi. So says the Gemara b'marava, they argued on the way that we explained. The machlekes Rav Shimon and Tanakama, and the Imamish said Fakir, that when it's halacha zutrasa, everyone's going to agree that it's kasha. The machlokes is going to be gufa when it's going to be halacha rabasi along halacha. Continues the Gemara, haylicha zar on the first white line. Tezvavam and aleph. If a zar, a 9 kayin does halacha, v'achzira kayin v'chazer v'halichai, and then a kayin does and comes and does halacha again. The children of Achin and Rav Yanai argue Chadam are kosher, Chadam are pasul. Says the Gemara, L'chayra, you know what this machlekes is? If you hold that the halacha can be fixed, then it's going to be kosher. If you hold the first shita is going to hold that it's going to be kosher because it can be fixed. And therefore it's going to be pasul. Says the Gemara, but alicha kayin v'chzirai is zar v'chzirai. What if the kayin did the halacha and then brought it back, and then the chazer v'alicha zar, then the zar did the halacha? What's the halacha now? The divrei machshir paisel, divrei paisel machshir. It's going to be mamish the opposite. Rav Amar, no. After the divrei paisel, it's going to be pasul. Why my taima? Because you still have to take it back, and therefore the taking it back is going to be an avoda, and therefore if the non-kohen takes it back in this scenario, is going to maintain the paslos even in this case. Amar le Rav Yirmiyah, the Gemara concludes, wrapping up this first parak, clarification of that which Rava just said. Amar le Rav Yirmiyah, Rav Ashi, Achim, Rav Yirmiyah, Difti, Hatzarch Lem Tuyeh. The case to which you have to take black is a machlekes of Rav Lazar Rabbanan. It's not. Rav Lazar, if you're walking in a place, you have to walk. You're doing halach in a place where halach is necessary. Machshava b'seles. Magshay zarch lahalech. Ein machshava b'seles. Ve'omar Rava. Hakol ma'idib. Everyone is maskim, says Rava. Kibloi b'achotz. If you caught the blood away from the mezbeach, v'chlisa b'fneim, and you brought it close. Zeu hilech shezarch lahalech. That's a case you have to do halacha. But kiblu b'fneim b'tzil achotz. Zeu hilech she'ein zarch lahalech. So what's the machlaika? Says Rava, lo nichluchu ela shechnisai v'chazar v'yitziyai. You brought it in and then you took it out, which is mamish our case. Marsav arsarch lam tuyei. The Tanakama holds that you have to take it back towards the mizbeach. Therefore, it's going to be called an avaydo marsavar. Lavki hiluch atzarch lavaydo dami is not considered a type of halacha that is needed for the avodah. Eisvei Abaye, so Abaye comes along and Abaye asks 1 second. Rabbi Eliezer, Oimer Mahalech Makim Zarch Lahalech Machshava B'Seles. Keitzad Kiblu B'Achos Achlis Lefnim Zeu Hilech Zarch Lahalech. Kiblu B'Fnim B'Til Achos Il Shein Zarch Lahalech. Ay B'Achos V'Chnisai. In the case where he brought it back, is Hilech Zarch Lahalech? So we see not like Rava. Answers Gemara, Amar, you're right. Tanya. If you have an explicit brayso that you respond to Abaye, then that's how we're going to have to learn. Hadron aloch kol zevachim. Hopefully by now we're starting to get our feet wet, get a little bit of a taste for a kachim. Anytime we have new limudim, just as we're getting a taste for it, we move on. But that's what the hadron, that's what the chazar is for. So let's just begin the second parak. Kol zevachim shekiblu damam zar einin tvul yaimim u'chaz kipurim. If the Kabbalah, if the catching of the blood was done by a zar, a non-kain, an einin, someone whose relatives dies, a tvul yaim, someone who went to the mikvah and needs a day to become tar, b'chasar kipurim, someone who's lacking the kapara, he didn't finish his kapara, b'chasar begadim, a kain's not wearing the proper begadim, sharachas yadayim v'reglayim, he didn't do kiddush yadayim v'reglayim for the nikiyar, arel, he doesn't have a bris milah, tameh, he's tameh, Yoshev, he's sitting. Aymed agabe kelim, he's standing on top of utensils. Agabe behema, agabe ragde chaveroi, meaning all cases that he's not standing on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. Pasal kibul b'smol, pasal. But Rav Shimon, in his last case of kibul b'smol, is machshir. So begins the Gemara with mikayros zar min alan. How do we know that if a zar does the Kabbalah of the dam, it's going to pass all the Tani Levi, Dabra Aram Valbanda of Lemar, Vinazru, Mikache B'nei Yisrael, V'gaimer. B'nei Yisrael, what does that mean? Lemute mai. Elim lemute nashim, karba nashim, B'toma karav. But the karbanis of a woman can be offered to B'toma? Of course not. So what's the case? Elimute akum. Hashtat sits leimeratze. Now that we know that sitz doesn't work for such a case, excuse me, B'toma karav, you can be able to bring such a carbon when you're tamei? Can't be. Elahachi kamar. So what do we learn out from the pasuk? So we learn out from here, the extra words of leichalu teaches us that if it's a non-koyin, if it's a zar, if he gets involved in other parts of the Avaida, if he does the Kabbalah, it's going to passel up the carbon, and that's going to be the makar for the first din of our Mishnah called Zevachim Kiblu Daman Zar. It's going to passel. Stop over here. I'll pick it up from Tanaveri Shmuel. It's going to bring another makar for this din, B'siyata Dishmaya.